New Jersey Governor Chris Christie delivered a strong apology for the Bridgegate saga today. He took full responsibility, fired his senior staff who lied to him, but did he do enough to restore his credibility and national image? And just how's the scandal going to resonate across the country? For that, let's check in with two nationally syndicated radio hosts, Mark Levine, Lars Larson. Gentlemen, thank you very much. What'd you hear today, Lars? What'd you hear today, especially from your callers?
I'm hearing from a lot of people that they don't necessarily believe that Governor Christie wasn't involved, but I frankly think he wasn't. He sat down with his staff a month ago, gave them the come to Jesus speech and said, tell me the truth. They didn't. He fired two of them today. And so I think that he's probably done what you'd expect an executive to do. Frankly, I'd be more concerned about his position on guns and illegals than this craziness by his outlaw staff members jamming up the world's most traveled bridge.
Yeah, no, okay, well, we can get to that in a minute. Mark Levine, I want to get your same take. What did you hear? Now, you're on the liberal side, and I presume your callers are on the liberal side. What did you hear them talking about when they talked Christie?
Well, it's interesting because I do have some conservative callers, too, and 201, everyone was talking against Governor Christie. The liberals say, look, this is the culture of corruption. This is the kind of cronyism we see in New Jersey where there's political payback. You reward your friends and you punish your enemies any way you can. But what's interesting to me is Rush Limbaugh condemned Chris Christie. Senator Graham came out and said, if my staff did this, they would know I was opposed to it.
What did Rush say?
This isn't just one or two.
What did Rush say? I didn't listen today. What did Rush say?
Rush said that this is typical for Christie. This is the kind of thing that he does. I mean, he was an attack on Christie. I don't remember the exact quote.
You know, Lars,
Larry,
okay, Rush may be right or may not be right, but we had a good segment earlier in the show. I mean, the whole thing kind of hinges around this 1 hour, you called it a come to Jesus meeting. He had a 1 hour meeting with his senior staff, and he asked them if they had done anything regarding Bridgegate or any of those kinds of games, and they said no. And so then he left it until he discovered the emails last night or two nights ago where he immediately made firing. Now, if it turns out, maybe this is the if of the year for Christie or the next 2 years, if it turns out that that 1 hour meeting story is true and correct and nobody fessed up, then I think Christie's a huge winner here because he took immediate action to fire, you know, the bad apples on his staff.
Well, Larry, I agree with you because one of the things I think he got a chance to do on the national stage today, since the whole country's watching it, is act like the way an executive should. Take decisive action, fire the people responsible, which doesn't happen often enough at the White House or at all, depending on your point of view. And he did just that. So I think he did get a chance to, you know, to act presidential, if you will. And I think that's what he's suggesting. Now, could people have said, well, he should have done what the Bergen Record did and actually tell his chief of staff or his IT director, go take a look at all the emails of my staff members and see if any of them are mentioning traffic or Fort Lee. That's all the newspaper reporters did, and yet we don't get that kind of oversight within government agencies. So that's a fair criticism of his response to it. But I guess if you tied up your office doing nothing but internal investigations, you could probably get every government bureaucracy tied up that way.
He stonewalled for months. For months, he made a joke of it. Remember how they got these documents to begin with. They investigated, the New Jersey people did, and the administration refused. The Christie administration refused to give them any documents. They subpoenaed them. They held them in contempt. They went to court to stop it, and the New Jersey court said, turn it over. It's positively Nixonian. They got the documents only through the use of the courts, and now finally they have the documents. Finally, Christie reads them.
I'd actually
remember, it's not just one or two people. There's like 5 or 6 or 10 or 20 people involved. Mark, there's a lot of people involved.
You're right, Mark, but that wasn't Christie's doing. That was the
it wasn't?
That was that was not Christie's
and the
doing.
real
you're telling me Christie didn't tell his people to turn over the documents?
No, the guys who turned over the documents were the two Port Authority appointees. And when they go to the Port Authority, Christie has no power over them.
Why didn't Governor Christie order them to turn over the documents? Why didn't he say, get to the bottom?
He can't.
Oh, I'll fire you.
No, but
why didn't he say that 2 months ago?
They have to follow state law, Mark.
That's right. You stop yapping and just listen to me. Now, the other thing he can do,
it's not opposed to state law.
He can do this, Lars. He can order everyone in the executive branch in Trenton to turn over emails and text messages. That he can do, and I asked this question in our earlier segment, and I will ask you, should he not do that and make every effort to supply the assembly, the state assembly, with that evidence?
Yes. Yes, he absolutely should do that. And I think the real test of whether or not he's telling the truth about this is going to be, now that he's fired some people, somebody, if they know otherwise, that Governor Christie knew about this before he claims to have known about it yesterday morning from the Bergen Record, is going to have to come forward and say, no, the governor knew about it, or I have an email, something along those lines. If that proof is out there, then Christie is in real trouble and his presidential prospects dim.
All right, 20 seconds, Mark Levine. You're going to, essentially, your point is this issue is far from settled. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, and it's larger than whether Christie knew about it ahead of time. He set up a culture of corruption. They would say, okay, time for traffic problems in Fort Lee, and everyone just followed suit. If there were a bunch of honest people there, it wouldn't happen.
Mark Levine, Lars Larson, our 2 radio guys. I love radio, by the way.
It's Freedom Files with James Burns.
Welcome to the Freedom Files podcast for this Wednesday, November 9th, 2011. I am James Burns, and yes, another big debate going on tonight, hosted by CNBC and the Michigan Republican Party. It's going to be at 7 p.m. Central on CNBC, just in case any of you might be interested. We're going to break down a preview of the debate, what you probably can expect from tonight. Most of the time we'll probably go to Romney, Kaine, Perry, and Newt. Some of the time we'll go to Bachmann, Santorum, and Huntsman, and the least amount of the time we'll go to, yes, you guessed it, Ron Paul. But it could be worse. He could be like Gary Johnson, who once again didn't get an invite. Kaine will talk about 999 as usual, and will most likely be confronted by the correspondents and his fellow neocon-teocons about his sex charges. Why isn't Perry under the same scrutiny as Kaine is anybody's guess? I mean, he has his own skeletons in the closet. Romney, meanwhile, will continue to claim that there's a difference between Romney Care and Obamacare, and he'll probably tangle with Perry a couple of times. Maybe this time there'll actually be a fist fight. Yeah, ratings. That'd be nice. Maybe it'll be a slap fest instead. Perry's going to continue to come across as awkward and a big fat joke. He'll do his fair share of attacking as well as getting attacked by other candidates. While the HPV vaccine scandal has been brought up, along with the sanctuary cities, not a word about the Trans-Texas Corridor, the NAFTA Superhighway, or his visit to Bilderberg a couple years ago. Gee, I wonder why. Moving on to Newt. He's going to play peacemaker, as usual, continue to pass himself off as the great unifier of the GOP. Mr. NAFTA and Nancy's We Power isn't going to go away anytime soon, while Bachmann, Perry, and now Kaine Starr have all fallen. As candidates drop out of the race, Newt will paint himself as the new home for the former candidate's supporters. And like McCain in 2008, who, as we all know, came out of nowhere, Newt is going to most likely end up winning the GOP nomination, unfortunately. Bachmann, well, she's just about dumb. She's dumb and done. But what little charm she once had is long since gone. And she keeps looking scarier and scarier. Santorum is an extreme neocon warmonger and is always looking like he's angry and agitated. So he really has no chance of getting the GOP nomination either. And then that leaves us with John Huntsman. He's a great speaker, but he's not conservative enough for the average GOP supporters. And he continues to come across as nothing more than a clone of Mitt Romney, and that's a bad thing. Most of the candidates are jockeying for position, getting their 50 minutes of fame, and at the same time, as they continue to attack each other, the candidates that do drop out are going to ultimately endorse their fellow presidential candidates. That's a given. They're going to go after the one that they believe will be the winner, in the hopes of course, reaping the rewards should their pick get the GOP nomination and elected. That's what it's all about, the spoils of war. I also expected candidates are going to support Israel tonight, yap about how they got to bomb Iran, launch a preemptive strike because Iran's going to have a bomb. Oh no! They're going to attack Obamacare as usual, and of course whisper sweet nothings, the same lies and BS in your ears that they've done in the past gazillion debates so far. Also look for CNBC to conduct the same type of ADD, ADHD interview like the rest of the mainstream media has, not giving the candidates equal time or allowing all of them to answer the questions and topics brought forth during the debate. So that's nothing new. Which brings us now to Congressman Ron Paul. And like I've mentioned, look for him to get the least amount of time and ask the least amount of questions tonight. The mainstream media would like nothing more than to kick him out of all the debates, all remaining quadrillion, zillion, bazillion of them. But at the same time, they know how popular Ron Paul is and how much money his campaign has brought in through grassroots donations. And he's also getting more donations from Americans serving in the military than Obama, Romney, Perry, Kaine, Newt, Bachmann, or any of the other candidates running. Unlike most of the other GOP candidates, Ron Paul has the financial and physical support to stay in the race to the last of the GOP primaries. Win or lose, he has my support. And it doesn't really matter if Kaine, Perry, Romney, Newt wins, or if Obama somehow gets reelected or selected, whichever way you want to look at it. It's Ron Paul or bust, in my humble opinion. And speaking of crappy candidates, here's a little something from last week's interview with Bob Chapman.
And the final question is from Max. What is your take on Kaine's 999 plan?
I really don't think it's workable. And what is the answer? I haven't spent a lot of time on it. But I would think that some sort of a flat tax would work. And the main thing is that money would flow directly to the government, and it would be none of these write-offs, and you wouldn't need the IRS, except perhaps to collect money for the government. You know, Business A says, well, we made $1 million, and this is, our tax is 17%. Here it is. There's no write-offs. There's nothing to argue about. And revenue would go through the roof. And even if it was a 1 or 2% tax, revenue would increase. The less money you give government, the better, because they'll always find ways to spend it.
And that's pretty much how Bob Chapman, the international forecaster, feels about Kaine's 999 plan. And speaking of Bob Chapman, he'll be on the podcast tomorrow, November 10th, Thursday. So if you got a question for Bob, send it my way via the freedomfiles.us website. And if you live in the Shreveport-Bossier area and are interested in hanging out with myself and other Ron Paul supporters during the debate tonight on CNBC, we'll be dining at Cantina Laredo, so I hope to see you there and tomorrow with Bob for another edition of the Freedom Files podcast.